I had stomach cramps in a toilet stall when suddenly my husband and his secret lover walked in. I have been married to Mark, 35M, for 7 years. We met in college, built a life together, and I thought we were solid. Not perfect, but what marriage is. I believed we were partners, that no matter what life threw at us, we had each other's backs. Turns out I was the biggest fool in the world. It all started with a dinner. Mark had been distant for months, but I chalked it up to stress. He had just landed a big promotion, which meant longer hours, work trips, and more responsibilities. I was proud of him, even if it meant seeing him less. We had always been the kind of couple that gave each other space to grow, and I had no reason to think this was any different. Looking back, there were signs. His phone was always face down. He suddenly became too tired for date nights, and he started making vague comments about feeling disconnected. But I trusted him. I never pushed, never pried. That was my mistake. That night, we were at a fancy work event to celebrate his promotion, a big corporate dinner, all of his colleagues, an expensive menu with dishes I couldn't even pronounce. Everything was fine until my stomach started cramping halfway through. At first, I ignored it, but by the time dessert came around, it was clear I had eaten something that wasn't sitting right. I barely got through a conversation with his boss before I leaned over and told Mark I needed to step out for a minute. He barely acknowledged me, too wrapped up in whatever conversation he was having. I made my way to the hotel bathroom as fast as I could, praying I wasn't about to throw up in a five-star restaurant. The place was empty, thank God, and I locked myself in a stall, bracing against the walls as I waited for the nausea to pass. I figured I'd take a few minutes to get myself together, then go back out like nothing happened. That was the plan, at least. Then the door opened. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another guest. But then I heard Mark's voice. I froze. There was no reason for him to be in here. None. My stomach twisted into something far worse than food poisoning as another voice followed. Hers. They had no idea I was there. The bathroom was silent except for them. I sat completely still, listening as she told him how glad she was that they had finally slipped away from the crowd. Mark responded in a way that made my entire body go cold. He wasn't just playing along. He was comfortable, like this was something they had done before. She told him she hated sneaking around, that she didn't want to be a secret forever. He told her to be patient. He was working on it. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe. It felt like hours. I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe too hard, afraid they'd realize I was there. She told him she was tired of waiting. He promised it wouldn't be much longer. The way he spoke, the ease in his voice, the fact that he had the nerve to say my name like I was the problem, like I was an obstacle he had to get through, was almost too much to take. I wanted to burst out, to scream, to demand an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to press record, capturing every disgusting word. I didn't know how long I would need, so I kept it going. There was no way in hell I was leaving that bathroom empty-handed. I sat there, silent, listening to my husband make promises to another woman, listening to him tell her that I was the one standing in their way, listening to him act like he was stuck with me, like he hadn't made vows, like he wasn't the one who had built this life with me in the first place. Eventually, she told him they should go before someone caught them. He agreed. They left, completely unaware that I had been there the whole time. The second the door shut, I let out a slow breath, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do first. I could barely think past the rage flooding my system. One thing was certain, though. I wasn't going to let him know what I had heard. Not yet. Mark thought he was in control, that he had time, that he could handle things his way. He had no idea his time had just run out. I didn't go back to the party. There was no way I could sit next to Mark, pretend to smile, and act like I didn't just hear him planning his future with another woman. Instead, I walked straight out of the hotel, got into my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, my brain racing through every moment of our marriage. 7 years. 7 years of love, loyalty, and building a life together, completely wiped out by a conversation in a hotel bathroom. I ended up at Mia's house. She's been my best friend since college, the one person I knew I could go to without hesitation. The second she opened the door and saw my face, her expression darkened. What happened? I walked past her, straight to the couch, and pulled out my phone. Listen to this. I played the recording. Mia sat beside me, her body going rigid as Mark's voice filled the room. The way he spoke to her, the way he made me sound like an inconvenience, a problem to be dealt with. It was all there, every lie, every excuse, every disgusting whisper between him and the woman he was cheating on me with. When the recording ended, Mia exhaled sharply, her hands clenched into fists. I'll kill him, she muttered. I shook my head. Not yet. She turned to look at me, narrowing her eyes. Not yet? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I want to destroy him first. Mia was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. Tell me everything. That's when the plan started forming. First, I needed to know everything: who she was, how long this had been going on, and just how deep this betrayal ran. Luckily, Mark was stupid. He had a bad habit of reusing passwords, and I knew at least 3 that he had used in the past. It took me less than 5 minutes to get into his email, and what I found made my stomach turn. There were hundreds of messages. This wasn't just some fling, it had been going on for almost a year. Hotel reservations, dinner confirmations, flights booked under his name with hers as a guest. I scrolled through their messages, feeling sicker with every line. He told her he loved her. He told her she was the only thing keeping him sane. He called her baby, sent her pictures, promised her a future. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I forwarded everything to myself. Every single email, screenshot, and receipt. If I was going to burn his life to the ground, I needed evidence. Mia was reading over my shoulder, her anger only growing. This is disgusting, she said. Does he even talk to you like this? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Mark and I shared a joint account, but I had my own separate savings. The joint account had been mostly for bills, groceries, and shared expenses, but I noticed something odd. Over the past few months, large sums of money had been withdrawn. He had been funding their affair with our money. That was the last straw. That night, I transferred every last cent from our joint account into my personal one. I wasn't leaving him with a dime. I also changed the passwords on all my personal accounts, just in case he tried anything. Mia helped me draft an email to our bank, removing Mark's access to everything. By the time I was done, Mark officially had nothing. I still didn't know who she was, just that she worked with him. But Mark was lazy. He used the same email for everything, and with a little digging, I found an old reservation under both their names, Jessica. I recognized her immediately. She had been at our wedding. One of Mark's coworkers, someone I had spoken to, smiled at, had small talk with over company dinners, someone who had looked me in the eye while she was sleeping with my husband behind my back. Mia had to physically stop me from marching out the door to find her that very second. Not yet, she reminded me, repeating my own words back at me. We do this right. She was right. I wasn't going to let my emotions ruin my revenge. I was going to be patient. The next morning I went home, Mark was still asleep, completely unaware that his world was about to fall apart. I acted normal, kissed him on the cheek, made coffee. He had no idea that I knew everything. I had a plan, and I needed him to think nothing was wrong. So I did what any loving wife would do. I planned a surprise dinner. I spent the next few days pretending everything was fine. It wasn't easy, but I had years of experience playing the role of the supportive wife. Mark didn't notice anything was off. He was too comfortable, too confident in his little secret, too sure that I was oblivious. I told him I wanted to celebrate his promotion properly, just the two of us. He seemed excited about the idea, which only made me angrier. He had no guilt, no hesitation. He kissed me on the forehead and said he'd make reservations at one of our favorite restaurants. I let him think he was in control. But I was the one setting the stage. The night of the dinner, I made sure everything was perfect. I wore the dress he always complimented, did my hair the way he liked, and even made small talk in the car like nothing was wrong. It almost made me sick. When we got to the restaurant, the hostess greeted us warmly and led us to our table near the back. Mark ordered his usual, completely unaware that I had planned every detail of the night down to the very last second. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. But I wasn't going to the restroom. I was meeting someone. Jessica walked into the restaurant 5 minutes later. She didn't see me, but I saw her immediately. She was dressed up too, her makeup perfect, her hair styled like she had put real effort into tonight. Because she had. She thought she was meeting him. Mark had no idea, but I had sent her a message from his phone earlier that day, pretending to be him. I told her I wanted to see her, that I couldn't wait any longer, that I needed to have dinner with her. I told her to meet me here at this exact time. And just like that, she showed up, all dressed up for my husband. I stood back and watched as she looked around the restaurant, searching for Mark. The moment she spotted him, she started walking toward our table, completely oblivious. Mark looked up just as she reached us. And then everything fell apart. His face went pale the second he saw her standing there. He blinked, clearly trying to process what was happening, but it was too late. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my wine, waiting for the moment it would all click for him. Jessica's smile faltered. Uh, what is this? Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked between us, completely trapped, and I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then, I set my glass down and smiled. Oh, Mark didn't tell you? I said, keeping my voice sweet. We're celebrating his promotion tonight, as husband and wife. Jessica's eyes widened. She turned to Mark, shaking her head slightly, like she was waiting for him to tell her this was all some kind of joke. But Mark had nothing. He just sat there, frozen, his entire life crashing down around him. I don't understand, Jessica finally said, her voice unsteady. I pulled my phone out of my purse, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it so she could see. The audio recording played, loud and clear, every word, every promise, every disgusting lie. The color drained from her face. Mark reached for my arm, but I yanked it away. Sit down, I said, my voice like ice. He obeyed instantly. I turned my attention back to Jessica. I thought you deserved to hear it for yourself, I said. You've been waiting so patiently for him to leave me, right? Well, here's the truth. He was never going to. You were just the backup plan. Jessica looked like she wanted to disappear. She was shifting on her feet, glancing toward the exit like she was about to bolt. But I wasn't done. By the way, I added, I hope you didn't really think he was paying for all those hotels and dinners himself. He was using my money. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Don't feel too bad, though, I continued, setting my phone down. He won't be using my money for anything anymore. Mark finally found his voice. We don't have to do this here, he said, his voice low. I tilted my head. Oh, but I want to. Jessica turned on him then. Wait, what does she mean he won't be using her money? I smiled. Oh, right, he doesn't know yet. Mark tensed. I let the moment stretch, enjoying his discomfort. Then I dropped the final bomb. I emptied our joint account, I said, keeping my eyes locked on his, transferred every last cent into my personal one. You have nothing. Oh, and I called the bank this morning. You're no longer authorized on any of my accounts. Mark's entire body stiffened. You did what? I also changed the locks, I continued, enjoying the way his face was shifting from pale to red. So you might want to find somewhere else to stay tonight. Jessica stepped back like she had just been slapped. Wait, you live with her? I let out a soft hum. He did. Not anymore. Mark turned to Jessica, but she was already grabbing her purse. You told me you were done with her, she snapped. You told me. Mark reached for her, desperate now. Just. She jerked away. Don't touch me. And just like that, she was gone. I picked up my wine glass again, letting the silence between us settle. Mark looked like he wanted to flip the table over. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight, but there was nothing he could do. He had lost. When the waiter walked over, oblivious to the emotional wreckage at our table, I smiled up at him. We're done here, I said. The bill is on him. I grabbed my purse and walked out, leaving Mark sitting there, completely shattered. He had no home, no money, and no mistress left to run to. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't go home that night, not to the home we shared at least. Instead, I went to Mia's, where she had already set up a guest room for me. The second I walked in, she handed me a glass of wine and flopped onto the couch beside me. Well, she asked, barely able to contain her excitement, how did it go? I sat back, taking a slow sip before answering. Better than I could have hoped. She grinned. Tell me everything. I did. From the moment Jessica walked in, to Mark's face when I played the recording, to the absolute mess that unfolded once he realized he had nothing left. By the time I was finished, Mia was practically vibrating with satisfaction. This is the best thing you've ever done, she declared. Seriously, you should teach classes on revenge. I smiled, but my mind was already elsewhere. Because while Mark had lost, I wasn't completely done yet. The divorce papers had already been drawn up. My lawyer had made sure of it. Since I had gathered plenty of evidence, financial records, proof of infidelity, and even the text messages I had pulled from his email, there was no way he was getting a dime from me. Mark had always assumed that if we ever split, I'd be fair, that I'd leave him with something. But fair went out the window the moment he decided to betray me. I sent the papers to his office the next morning. He didn't even get a chance to settle into his day before he was handed an envelope with my signature at the bottom. I made sure they were served publicly, right in front of his coworkers. If he wanted to act like a victim, he was going to have to do it in front of an audience. He didn't reach out. I think by that point he finally understood that I wasn't playing games. But I knew what he was doing. I knew he was trying to damage control. I found out through mutual friends that he had been staying with a coworker, bouncing between spare couches while he tried to figure out his next move. Jessica had cut him off completely. From what I heard, she refused to even be in the same room as him at work. He was alone. Meanwhile, I was thriving. It wasn't just about being free of him, it was about reclaiming my life. For too long, I had poured everything into our marriage, into making him comfortable. Now, for the first time in years, I was doing things for me. I moved into a new apartment, decorated it exactly how I wanted, and focused on myself in ways I had neglected for far too long. One night, a few weeks after everything had settled, I got a text from an unknown number. I really messed up, didn't I? It was Mark. I stared at the message for a long time. Maybe, a few months ago, I would have felt something: anger, sadness, maybe even a flicker of nostalgia for the life we had built together. But now, nothing. Just the cold, simple fact that he was no longer my problem. I deleted the message, and then I blocked his number because I had already won.